Did She-Hulk need more episodes? Is that why it didn't perform well? That's what CBR seems to think. Disney Plus has a huge problem with its original content, and that's the quality. Something that wasn't apparent at the beginning of the streaming service, in part because it was all new and exciting, but also because over time, the audience went from excited to disenchanted to outright disappointed after repeatedly low quality entertainment. Unfortunately, this isn't something that Bob Iger seems to be interested in correcting. Instead, he's focused on the money. So Disney has cut spending, they've reduced their labor force, and they've reevaluated the number of projects that are going to come out every year. But it doesn't address the real problem, which is the creative team behind these projects. So let's look at what CBR has to say. CBR is basically analyzing, not really analyzing, but looking at the mistakes of the Disney Plus series and basically believing that the problem is the fact that they didn't have enough episodes. For the length of the Infinity Saga, the Marvel Cinematic Universe ruled the box office. The franchise was an unstoppable force that continued to produce record-breaking films. After Avengers Endgame, the franchise decided to make the jump into TV with new shows on Disney+. From WandaVision to Secret Invasion, each MCU series has met with varying levels of success. For many of the shows, though, Marvel has continued to make the same mistake. By limiting many of the series' episode count to only 6 episodes, the shows are unable to live up to fan expectations and tell truly compelling stories. Now, the episode count is definitely not the problem here, because they all have about the same number of episodes and they all have similar pacing issues. So it's not the number of episodes, it's the content, it's the lack of interesting plot or interesting characters. You either need to have an interesting plot or you need to have a very character-focused narrative, which doesn't work when you spend a bunch of time showing us cameos and having to divide the screen time through a large cast instead of focusing on the titular character. WandaVision was the biggest success of all the MCU TV series, followed closely by Loki. Both of these series were on the opposite end of the spectrum as far as series length. WandaVision was 9 episodes long and told an in-depth story about loss and grief. This was then continued in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which I think should not have happened. I think it should have been a standalone Doctor Strange film instead of a Wanda Maximoff and America Chavez film. Loki told a very condensed story that looked at the evolution of Loki and set up Kang as the future MCU villain, which I don't think it did a good job of. It didn't really flesh out who Kang was or that he was even Kang, because they called him He Who Remains. WandaVision found success because the series was given a lot of space to grow its story and its characters. Loki is one of the few shows to successfully use the 6-episode format because Loki had so much time in other MCU films. For many Marvel shows, the 6-episode format has been an utter failure. So with Loki, again, the Loki story was very plot driven. There wasn't too much time devoted to the peripheral characters, and some of those were just other versions of Loki. The story was about the 2 Lokis, and it focused on that. That's why that show succeeded, is because it gave something to the audience for them to focus on. WandaVision was really interesting at first because it had all that mystery, and it did a really good job of stringing the audience along, making us want to come back and continue watching the episodes to figure out what was going on. Unfortunately, it didn't end how anyone wanted it to. So even though fans were having fun coming up with theories about who was behind everything, whether it be Mephisto or whether this be a not Secret Invasion, but a House of M adaptation. And people thought that in part to the fact that Elizabeth Olsen did a TV promo holding up House of M and talking about that comic. So when it turned out that it really was just Agatha all along, and the Quicksilver from the Fox X-Men universe ended up being a guy named Ralph Bohner, of course people were disappointed. The plot didn't really go anywhere. Moon Knight and Secret Invasion are the perfect examples of how the MCU has failed its TV shows and its characters. Fans were extremely excited for the introduction of Moon Knight to the MCU, yet the show didn't quite live up to the hype. Were they though? I honestly don't remember people being excited for Moon Knight. Like, there was some, and there are people who equate Moon Knight to Marvel's Batman, but he doesn't have anywhere near that level of popularity. Moon Knight is known for intense action and complicated story focused on mental health. While the series did deliver on some action, the story and character development left much to be desired. The short series didn't have nearly enough time to explore Mark Spector's complicated relationship with his alter personalities. The series ultimately left a lot on the table, and fans are unsure of when they will get to see Moon Knight again. So they did tease the Jake Lockley persona at the very end, and I kind of agree with this section here. I think that Moon Knight should have not included his ex-wife as part of the story. I think they should have focused on him getting used to the multiple personalities. And then by the end of the first season, when he kind of has his life together, then he gets into season 2 and he realizes that he had a wife. He would have been able to focus more on the dichotomy between Mark Spector and Arthur Harrow, I think the villain's name was. But he definitely should have focused more on Mark Spector and his alternate personalities. Secret Invasion was one of the shortest MCU series yet, with extremely short episode times to go along with only having 6 episodes. While Loki made the 6-episode format work due to the character's history in the MCU, again, it's not so much the history because Nick Fury has also had history in the MCU. It's the fact that it was very plot focused. Secret Invasion failed to use the Skrulls or Nick Fury's history well. Yes, I agree with that. The story of Secret Invasion was a sham of what the comic event was, and the series seemed to survive more on mediocre reveals of who had been Skrulls. There was very little character development or even development for the overall MCU. Even the introduction of the Super Skrull failed to elicit much excitement from fans. So yeah, I mean, I think Secret Invasion was not planned that far back. I mean, look at Civil War was an entire movie. That was a big comic book event. Secret Invasion was another big comic book event. And as I've mentioned before, I think Secret Invasion should have been its own Infinity Saga that encompassed a few years worth of films and TV series. You can't make it one TV series. And especially like what's important about it, what's interesting about it is how it affects the superheroes. What happens when the superheroes are infiltrated, not low-level politicians and some other characters that we don't really care about. Even in terms of what they set out to do with a spy thriller focused on Nick Fury, they kind of got away from the spy thriller aspect towards the second half of the series, and they spent the whole time crapping on Nick Fury. What's the chances that he's going to have a redemption arc? In the MCU's rush to capitalize on the battle for streaming dominance, it seems as if the franchise has valued quantity over quality. Yeah, no kidding. Since 2021, there have been 9 different Marvel shows, and most of them have been met with a lukewarm reception. She-Hulk was given a full 9-episode series, and much of the series failed to properly develop Jen Walters as a character. I don't think they've developed her character at all. I mean, the entire series from front to back was her remaining exactly the same. They just threw in cameos and threw in characters to basically validate She-Hulk. I mean, there wasn't really a plot. The whole point of the show was to validate the existence of MCU She-Hulk. With so many shows, even the excellent ones like Miss Marvel get overlooked and received a much lower view count than other more mediocre series. Even Falcon and the Winter Soldier struggled to find its own identity beyond a Captain America Winter Soldier repeat within its short episode count. If the MCU lowered the amount of series it was producing, then the quality of the series may increase. So again, it's not... Actually, I'll read the rest of this real quick before I give my comments. Phase 4 and 5 have been a bit of a mixed bag for the MCU, and the TV series have a lot to do with that. Many of the TV series aren't given the screen time they need to properly tell the story or develop their characters. There are so many shows being developed that it can be difficult for fans to dedicate their time to a series that will have a little other connections with the MCU, or even add anything of significance to the main character. Man, this thing has so many spelling errors. WandaVision is the most successful show, and it's the format that should be emulated going forward. Sure, if you want to bait the audience until the last episode and realize your plot sucked. In terms of this idea of lowering the amount of series, honestly, it doesn't matter as much as the creative team behind the series. Bob Iger is focused on the money, and he's talking about how too many Disney Plus series and movies diluted the brand, which is a similar comment to what some other people have been saying about superhero fatigue. Superhero fatigue doesn't exist. People aren't tired of superheroes. On the contrary, we want more superheroes. We're tired of poor quality content. And that's not because of the budget, because look at Secret Invasion's budget of over $200 million. Where the hell did that go? It's not the budget. It's not the number of series out there, because Loki did fine. It's the creative team. It's the people writing and directing the series. You need people whose values align with the audience. And I don't mean political values, although that can make a difference on occasion. I mean people who care about faithfully adapting the source material, who actually give a damn about the characters that they're adapting on the screen. That's the difference between phases 4 and 5 and phases 1 through 3. I'm not going to pretend like everyone who worked on every single film from phases 1 through 3 was the biggest comic book fan, but at least they cared. Progress was made between phases 1 through 3. Not just CGI, but with the writing, with the character development. It's not that fans are expecting every phase 4 or 5 film and TV series to be bigger and better than Endgame. It's just that we hoped to see at least the same standard of quality as phase 3, if not starting to get a little bit better over time. Instead, we saw the opposite. In the sense of storytelling, phases 4 and 5 has fallen far below even phase 1. They've forgotten why people want to see movies about these characters. That's enough ranting from me. Tell me what you think in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like and subscribe button, and thanks for watching.